Welcome back to Sports Talk. Tonight, we are very pleased, very excited to be launching a 4-part mini-series called Canuck Captains with Jim Robson. Coinciding with the 40th anniversary of NHL hockey here in Vancouver, Jim Robson has collaborated with Jason Farris on another book. It's not their first. This is called Hockey Play-by-Play, Canuck Captains with Jim Robson. And this book includes a chapter on each of the first 10 before Henrik was named captain this year. And each features a memorable game for that captain, along with Jim's handwritten notes and much more. And you can find out about this at a website called CanuckCaptains.com. We'll tell you more about that later. And the book is available at all British Columbia-based London Drugs locations. So we launch our mini-series tonight with the one and only original play-by-play voice of the Vancouver Canucks, Jim Robson, in studio, along with Jason Farris. Hello, Jim.
Hi there, Dan. How are you tonight?
I am doing great. And Jason, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Dan. Good to be here.
I'm excited to be able to talk to you guys tonight. We're going to have a special captain in our second segment coming up here. And then in the weeks to come, we're going to have Orland Kurtenback and Trevor Linden and Stan Smyl reminiscing with Jim and I about being the captain of the Vancouver Canucks. Well, Jason, you've done a book with Jim before. That was the original hockey play-by-play book. How did this concept come about?
Well, this concept came about because Jim did over 2,000 NHL games, and we profiled 55 in that first book, which was very well received. And Canuck fans, I think, had asked for more games than just the 55. So we've come along here and said, rather than focusing on a feature night in each NHL city, we're going to choose a memorable night for each of the men that led the Canucks so proudly for the first 40 years. And again, reproduce all of Jim's wonderful notes. Also with John Shorthouse in the last couple of years, he contributes his notes to the book. And then lots of commentary from each of the captains of the Canucks. So you get a real insight into not only their leadership approach and their style, but also many of them played for some of the other captains. So you get kind of a neat look at the other captains from the emerging captains. So it's a good, well-rounded look, I think, at Canuck captaincy.
Just before I get into the captains and talking about it with both you and Jim, tell me about Canuck Place and how it comes into play here.
Well, the last book we did was to benefit Canuck Place, and we raised some good funds for them, and also I think as importantly awareness. And really, the idea for this book was the last one was $44.95, and it sold out pretty quickly and didn't get all over the province. And so this time we said, well, let's do something that's a little bit lower priced. It's $14.99, and of that, we're going to give $4 a book to Canuck Place. And I think, our goal here is, again, to raise awareness for Canuck Place, but also to really raise some significant funds for Canuck Place. And London Drugs has been a big partner in this. It's the only place fans can buy it in stores is in London Drugs, and they make it possible for us to help donate money to Canuck Place, as does Budget Break and Muffler, who is the presenting sponsor. So really hope Canuck fans will get behind this book, enjoy 10 more memorable nights with Jim and John's notes, and help us raise needed funds for Canuck Place.
Lots of notes, lots of illustrations, lots of photos. It's pretty cool stuff. Now, Jim, this is a pretty special year, the 40th coming around, and I want to ask you, before we get going, what opening night was like for you, October 9th, not 1970, but here in 2010, being introduced as part of a big entourage prior to the game at now Rogers Arena. What was that night like for you as the 40th anniversary of the team was saluted?
Well, it was excellent. And, excuse me, the Canuck organization has done an excellent job. When a new GM comes in, new owners, you wonder if all the traditions are going to be carried on or how they're going to be done, and they've done a terrific job. They brought in 16 members of the original Canuck team of 1970 with their wives. They were put up at the Sutton Place Hotel in Vancouver. They came in the day before. They had a nice social get-together, and they went to the rink the morning of the morning skate, and then got together for a meal and watched the game from a suite. But just to see the players reacting to each other. Many hadn't seen each other for almost 40 years.
Wow.
Because some of them that played on that first-year Canuck team did not play the second year or moved on to the WHA or whatever happened to them in their careers. And they really enjoyed this. And to see them all getting together and to be my wife and I were fortunate enough to be invited to be there and mostly to just sit back and talk. But I enjoyed visiting with these players as well. And
Wow.
Paul Popiel's one that comes to mind. Here's a hard-working journeyman. He played a bit of defense. He played left wing on a line with Boudria and Paymont. And he came up to me and said, you know, you got this Danish kid Hansen in the Canuck lineup, but he's not the first Dane to play for the Vancouver Canucks. Paul Popiel was born in Denmark. He moved to Canada as an 11-year-old and learned to play hockey. So he learned to play hockey in Canada, but he was the first Dane to play for the Canucks.
I didn't know that, and I'm trying to think, is he jersey 18? Was that his number?
Yes, it was.
Well,
yeah.
The first
but
year.
it was a great gathering, and to walk out on the ice, I went out with Garth Rizzuto.
Yes.
And he was thrilled, too. Here's a player from Trail who didn't play much with that first-year team. And but he was really excited to come out there. He says, you know, this is great. And Dale Talon, who was just ahead of us being introduced, turned to me just before he went on the ice. He says, do you think they'll boo me?
Really?
Yeah.
Well, they sure did not.
And I says, you know, some of them might.
Oh, no.
And they didn't. I was happy to hear that the crowd respected Talon as not only the GM of the Chicago Blackhawks in later life, but he was a great rookie with the Canucks. 56 points his rookie year, played 3 different positions, and things didn't go well down the road here, but he was thrilled, too, to hear the reaction from the fans.
Well, I mean, and looking, that's great that you convey that, because you could tell looking at their faces they came out. It was, I mean, Pat Quinn, I mean, here's a guy who's been in all kinds of situations. It looked like he was really soaking up all of that. Like he put his arms in the air. It's almost like when guys come here, and you've seen it, Jim, over the years, where players have come here from Ontario or wherever, and they just settle here. It becomes their home. How many times does that happen? And I think it happens here more than most NHL cities.
That's why I think the Vancouver Canuck alumni is such a good, active organization. And not just NHL guys involved. I think of their captain, Jerry Sillers, who didn't play in the NHL, but he's been the president of the Canuck alumni for many, many years. And these guys have a real feeling for the city and the team and the hockey tradition here. And a lot of those players who play games with the Canuck alumni never played for the Canucks. You think of Mark Loftus, who's a great scorer with the Canuck alumni, but never played for the Canucks, although he grew up in Kitsilano and played for the New Westminster Bruins. But,
close enough.
Yes. But there's that tradition here, and it's tough to build a tradition when you're a new team. I mean, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Montreal Canadiens, and the Boston Bruins, these teams have tradition, but Vancouver had to build it, and it's taken quite a while to do that. Well, without
a Stanley Cup too, it's hard.
Yes,
I mean, it's more difficult. It's probably the only thing that the organization hasn't had. I mean, if they'd had that, it may have happened quicker, but that's just the one thing missing.
Well, maybe that's why it's everybody's so hyped up every year when the season starts, because maybe this is the year. Maybe that carrot hanging out there, if it doesn't come right away, it's not so bad.
Yeah.
But there is a great feeling here, and that was very well done by the Canuck organization. And, at the dinner, Mike Gillis came up and presented each player from the 1970 team with a 40th anniversary Canuck sweater.
Nice.
With his own number on the back.
Nice.
Nicely boxed with the 40th anniversary logo on it. And Wayne Mackey's widow was there. She put the sweater on, and she got all the people there to sign it.
Wow.
George Gardner's daughter was there and got her dad's sweater. George now deceased. And she put the sweater on, and it was a very special event.
I'm happy to hear they didn't miss a beat. That's very classy
No, it was
stuff.
well done. Yeah.
All right, as I say, in the weeks to come here, in our little mini-series, we're going to talk in depth with 3 of the captains, including Orland Kurtenback. So we won't talk about him too much tonight. We'll leave that for another night. But in your book, Jason, you do profile all of them, and I want to talk about Andre Boudria, because he was the second captain of the Vancouver Canucks.
That's right, and he was the leading scorer of the franchise at the time, and really, Super Pest was probably the star player at the time, and when Orland did hang it up, that next year, 74-75, which fans will remember as the memorable season when with Gary Smith and the Canucks played against Montreal in the first round, the Canucks actually didn't have a captain that season. But then that following season, 75-76, Andre was asked to be captain, and that turned out to be his last year in Vancouver. Not a particularly successful year for him on a personal front, but we try to chronicle his captaincy in that season, which was a reflection of the team and some of the troubles that they had, but also celebrate him as a Canuck, because he was certainly, probably to that point, the greatest Canuck in their history.
I guess he was, Jim, and yet I don't really remember him as the captain. So I know he was, but it just sort of flies under the radar.
Well, Boud led the Canucks in scoring in 4 of their first 5 seasons. He was a very clever center iceman, and his wingers always scored. I mean, he centered a line with Lever and Vervegart as 2 young wingers that scored a lot of goals that Boudria set up. But he wasn't always popular with management, and it was somewhat of a surprise, I think, when he was chosen as the captain. And Phil Maloney was then the general manager coach, and of course Phil led the Canucks to their first playoff appearance and the first place finish in their division when they weren't expected to do that well. And but there were some problems there with Andre Boudria, and at the end of that season there were games that he didn't even dress, and he was the team captain. So there were some real issues going on there off the ice. But Boud was a very good player, one of the best center icemen the Canucks have ever had, really. And he was popular with at least a segment of his teammates. I don't know if all of the team, but it was a kind of a troubled time in a way, and you learn that by looking at the book that Jason's put together. And what he's done is talk to some of the other players about the captain. So there's quotes there, not only from me, but from other players involved at that time. And so it's an interesting thing that Andre Boudria did become the captain, and probably wasn't really given the chance at times to be the leader on the team. But he was a leader in certain ways, and he was a heck of a hockey player. But he also went on to the WHA after that. And at that time, the NHL and the WHA were great rivals, and any player with the rumor mill came out or news came out that they were going to go to the WHA the next year, sometimes the NHL teams would sit that player out, or there would be issues involving that player. That might have been the case in Andre Boudria.
Yeah, the politics of the game. The young guys like me following it back then didn't know a thing about it, but it was happening. It was real. How about Chris Odleson next on the list, Jason?
Well, Chris Odleson was the captain again for 1 year that following season. That season was also a tumultuous one, as many were in the early 70s for the Canucks. It featured a coaching change, a change that saw Phil Maloney leave, and actually the first captain, Orland Kurtenback, come behind the bench as the coach. And so we took the opportunity to feature that first game with Chris Odleson wearing the C, playing for the new coach and the former captain, Orland Kurtenback. It was a 3-2 win in Los Angeles. It was a bit of a silver lining, I guess, for that season, but that's the game we feature, again, using Jim's notes. There's some great period photos in there, including one of Orland Kurtenback in about the ugliest brown plaid jacket you've ever seen behind the bench.
Stylish in that year.
But also a lot of the gear, the sticks, game-used sticks from Chris Odleson on that one, as well as a Canuck album, some of the marketing things that were going on in the city and around the team at the time. So it does take you back to a Canuck team that wasn't very good, but certainly Odleson was a classy player, a good smooth skating centerman, came over from Boston, so well-trained in leadership from Boston.
There's the Shoppers Drug Mart calendar there. I used to get that every year as a kid. And Jim's notes, just like the initial book that came out a few years back, in the game, I guess Jim kept them all. And every game has the summary that is Jim's notes as he took them during the game. So this was a Vancouver win 3-2. I just noticed on the out-of-town scoreboard, Cleveland beat Minnesota 4-3 that night on your notes.
Yes, Cleveland.
Just before going on and merging, actually.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say.
How about that? Cleveland and Minnesota merged to make one good NHL team.
Right, but they played each other this night.
Yeah. Well, it was the way it was in 1976. Right.
That's right. All right, set up this Don Lever's next, Jason. We have a piece of tape. Set this up for us.
Well, Don Lever, the game featured there is the game where he breaks his cheekbone. But the clip you're talking about was a fun album that was put out by the Canucks in the 1970s. It was called Hockey with a Little Help from Your Friends, the Vancouver Canucks. And this is Don Lever talking about what he thought it took to be a good player in practice in the NHL.
And my philosophy is for myself is always to just hit the net, dig down a little deeper and work harder. That's where teamwork comes in.
Hockey, with a little help from your friends, the Vancouver Canucks. Hey, we want to introduce you to the rage of South Porcupine, Ontario. This is Don Lever. Don plays forward for the Vancouver Canucks. And Don Lever travels in fast company.
Lever racing after it. Forte partially checked him. Lever cutting it on goal. Rolled it in front. McRae stopped it. It's loose. It's loose. They score!
Yeah, I was a goaltender till I was 12, and I was in the outdoor rinks, and my feet got so cold I decided I'd go outside and start skating.
This is Don Lever.
Okay, Don, what time do you think is the most important to really hustle in a practice, like near the beginning or middle of the end?
Well, first of all, when you come out on a warm-up, Dave, the warm-up's most important. Get the groins loose, get a little bit of a sweat on.
Well, I hadn't heard that yet, and I didn't know that I would have not just one of my idols on the same tape with Jim in studio here tonight, but Al Jordan.
Right.
There's Al Jordan at his
That's
best.
Al Jordan, one of the great announcers in Vancouver radio history, who was really the first disc jockey for teenage audience. And he brought along a young kid named Red Robinson and helped him out. And Red, of course, became legendary.
Whoa.
But Al Jordan was way back and did a lot of announcing, a lot of commercial work, and had the great pipes.
And he helped me when I was a very, very young guy. My middle daughter, her middle name is Jordan, and that's the reason why. Al Jordan, Jim Robson, and Don Lever, how to play hockey. All right, that's cool stuff. We'll have another piece of tape a little later on. And the next captain that's on the list is going to be on the line from Pittsburgh, staying up late night when we continue with Jim Robson and Jason Farris, the book Hockey Play-by-Play, Canuck Captains with Jim Robson. We'll be right back.